Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast.
Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Katie.
How are you?
I'm good. We made it, Jim, to February, and it feels like you can sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's happening closer to like 5:30 p.m., which is a really big deal for getting outside. And I feel a little bit lighter. There's a lot going on in the world, but at least the sun is coming back.
I felt the same way today too. This afternoon, I was like, wow, there's actually some warmth in the sun. But then I made the mistake of looking ahead to next week. It's going to be a little bit cold again. So just like we have a real winter this year, which seems a little bit different, And I think it's just adding a little extra challenge to all the challenging things that we as endurance athletes face.
Yes, I think so. And actually, this leads right into my very first insight today. I think that something noteworthy about this winter that's been different from the last few winters, I just feel like it's so windy. I don't know if you've been experiencing that in the Upper Valley, but there seems to be an average of like a 20-mile-an-hour wind every single day in Boston. And Boston is a city where most people run, for example, on the Charles. There will be a headwind that almost stops you in your tracks. And a short anecdote on that is that it was so windy the other day. I was running into the wind. It sounds like a plane is landing next to you kind of the whole time. And then I rounded a corner and there was like a building or a structure that was blocking the wind. And I tripped and almost fully fell on the ground because I was bracing my body so hard against the wind that I didn't actually know how to have a normal run cadence without doing that. So yeah, wind has been a lot.
I think Boston should be the windy city as well. I don't know what happens in Chicago, but in Boston, it's like legit. And, Boston's like this big running city, but I don't know how people do it down there. I think your running is so much harder in the city than it is in the country.
Yeah, I think so too. But I did want to share the insight that I was thinking about was that I've developed a hack for figuring out how to deal with this wind. So two things that I've done recently, I'm literally outsmarting the weather. One of them is that anytime I have any type of run interval workout, I will look up the forecast and look up the direction of the wind and do my warm up into the wind. The warm up still kind of sucks, but I'm not trying to go fast or anything. So it's just like it is what it is. It doesn't matter how slow I go. I round the corner and then I let the tailwind push me for the intervals, which is amazing. And I feel like you actually get a little bit of a speed boost. And maybe that's cheating, maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, I'm like, these are such adverse conditions that I feel like we have to take any boost that we can get. So challenge of the week is look at the wind forecast and plan yourself an awesome tailwind interval run. You're going to feel absolutely phenomenal.
I don't think it's cheating at all. Actually, I think it's great because you are probably going a little bit faster than when you normally would. And what we're just looking for is that stimulus, right? So that, like if you're going to say you were like, I plan to run my interval at 7-minute pace, but suddenly you're running 6:45, like I think it's a better workout, in my opinion, is you're getting pushed, right?
Okay, well, that's huge. I'm going to pitch one more to you. Something else I did that was wild recently was I was going for a long run and I really didn't want to deal with the wind. Again, it was going to be like 20, 25 miles an hour. And so I took a lift out to an endpoint and then I ran all the way back with a tailwind and it was amazing. So that actually might be cheating. I don't know. There was like literally no headwind the entire time, but it worked well for me. So I would say if you have the flexibility with your schedule to do that, it can be a way to outsmart the wind.
Well, again, it's not cheating. If you pay the Lyft driver, it's not cheating.
Nice. Okay. Then we're totally
Yeah.
good. I gave him a nice tip too. And actually, side note, he was like, what are you doing? He's like, this is just some random place in the middle of Bedford, Massachusetts, and you're just like getting dropped off. I was like, yeah, I'm running back to Boston. And he was very confused, but it all worked out. So highly recommend that as a potential tip.
Do you ever use AirPods to break the wind? Because I find that I get ground down so hard by the wind. And I find something that I really struggle with the most is the wind. And so I'll put AirPods in. I know it's not always safe to do that in certain locations, but I just find that's really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I will say, if you're running somewhere that's either really quiet in terms of not a lot of traffic, or if there's not like road traffic on whatever path you're on, I do think that that's an okay bet. I will say you have to use the noise canceling kind. The other kind actually makes it worse and amplifies the wind around you.
Yes.
So make sure to use that, but definitely like make sure to keep an eye on the conditions first to make sure it's safe.
So, folks, today we're going to do a little bit different. We got to back up a little bit here. So we're just going to do insights, right, all day here because we have so much going on with so many good content, folks sending stuff in, things are happening. It is February. So we're just gonna go back and forth on insights. So my insight is, it's a hot take. I'm gonna start with a hot take, okay? We're gonna start spicy here. But I really think if you're doing an Ironman, especially if you're like a level 1 athlete just starting on triathlon, that you really shouldn't focus much on the run at all. You really build up your bike and your swim fitness durability. That's my hot take. What do you think?
Well, I think it's really interesting because In an Ironman, you have to do a 4,200-yard swim, 112-mile bike, and this really, really long run. But I would say most people who are beginners at the Ironman distance do end up really doing kind of like a run walk. And there's a strategic way to do that. But there's not so much of a way to do a run walk in a bike or a swim. And so I agree with you that at a certain point, like everybody knows how to walk, right? All of us
Right.
tomorrow, if we really had to, could walk 26.2 miles or kind of jog, shuffle, whatever it is. And with the bike and the swim, you kind of really have to be able to complete the distance. So I want to hear more about this theory, but I don't think it's that hot of a take. I actually really like that.
Well, we all could walk 26 miles unless it was in the wind. Then I would definitely quit.
I can barely walk 2 miles in the wind, which is why I lift 2 miles away and then.
I'd be the guy on the Ironman, Facebook. What's the wind gonna be tomorrow? Like just obsessed about the wind. So no, but so here's my take is that yes, for most folks who aren't swimmers or not coming from a swimming background, like 4,000-yard swim is a really big deal. And most of my Ironman athletes are just, they're really just trying to get to the place where they can swim 4,000 yards. Like then they're starting with 2,000 yards, and then hopefully by like April they're swimming 3,000 yards pretty regularly. But also jumping up to 4,000 yards, it's a big, big, big ask. And if you ask any one of these Ironman athletes, or probably I bet 80% of the Ironman athletes, if you say, if you go swim 4,000 yards today, how will you feel the rest of the day? And I think for 90% of the people would say, I go home and I sit on the couch, or first I go to the cafe, I eat everything I can eat. I go home and eat everything I can eat, and then I'm on the couch for most of the day. So the point is, the 4,000-yard swim is just metabolic. It's super, super demanding. So like you say, there's no alternative. You have to get through it. Then you have to do 100 miles, which is a big, big deal. Actually, not even 100 miles, 112 miles. Because honestly, 100 miles you can do, but those last 12 miles, especially if you're at Lake Placid, are really, really, really hard. It's like you live and die, coming back from Wilmington. So anyway, so the point is that it's a lot of work to do 4,000 yards to make it at a regular swim. And it's a lot of work. I mean, so much work to make 100 miles, 112 miles feel like a somewhat normal thing you can do. And so for a lot of my athletes this year, I've sort of changed and said, listen, we're going to focus a lot on swim. We're going to focus a lot on bike volume. And yeah, we're going to run. We're going to run 3 times a week. We're not going to not run, but we're not going to go out and do like 10K speed, 5K speed. We're probably not going to I'm not going to have folks run 2 hours or more, maybe even less, because if they have, they have a big ride on Saturday, I may have them bike for an hour on Sunday morning and then maybe run for 75 minutes or 90 minutes, because I know for most of those folks, it's going to be a run shuffle. And unless they're coming from like a really strong run background, I'm just sort of saying, listen, guys, don't even worry about the run, the quote run, right? Let's worry about the swim. Let's worry about the bike. That's a big enough menu to eat from. You don't need to fill yourself up any more than that. And yeah, we'll do some time on feet. We'll go hiking. We'll do kinds of really fun stuff, but we're not really going to focus on that.
That's super interesting. I love this. And I do have a question for you. Follow-up question is, at what point would you actually throw the speed in? So what level of experience do you think someone needs to have where you're saying, okay, I'm going to push this run. We're going to run 18 miles, 20 miles in the build. Where does that all fit into this framework?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, we talk about like the first goal of any Ironman is to actually finish the Ironman. And the second one is to actually be able to sort of run most of the way. And that may mean still 11-minute miles, but you kind of ran most of it. Can you look at we always say, like, can you look at the judge and say, did you do this, right? And it's like, oh yeah, I tried to run. I ran most of the Ironman. And so I think after you reach that goal, you can start thinking about a lot more speed, bigger stuff. Or again, I've got some first time Ironman people this year who are very strong runners, and we are focusing on long runs and we are focusing on speed, but they've demonstrated that they can run, half marathons, marathons. You don't need to run a marathon to do an Ironman. Do not think that, but they're demonstrated they're very strong runners, and it's sort of their superpower. So I don't want to take away the superpower. I want to enhance the superpower. But again, for most folks who are just, who've signed up for their first Ironman journey, a lot of them are just trying to survive that time on feet, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. And I think the other point to underscore here is that it's a lot easier to get injured running than it is biking and swimming. And so if we want to optimize for like building up a ton of durability and not having such a high injury risk, then I love that. I think if we see niggles, it's almost always something that's related to running, not every single case, but love anything we can do to keep our athletes injury free throughout the season.
Hmm.
Amazing. Okay, so I like this back and forth popcorn situation.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm coming back to an insight from last year. I feel like we're allowed to do this because, again, we have a lot of podcasts and sometimes we just need a reminder of things that we've talked about before. But this insight is all about withholding judgment or not writing the narrative of the workout before it's even happened. And I bring this up because I am very guilty of this, where I'll get started on my bike or my run or my swim, and I think very carefully about how I'm feeling, even in the first 1 or 2 minutes. And I'll be like, oh, okay, well, my heart rate's already a little bit higher than I think it should be, be for just the first couple minutes of this workout? And what's it going to be like for the next 8 miles or the next 2 hours on the bike? And already I've started to create this narrative where I'm like, well, it didn't go well because of X, Y, and Z. I didn't sleep that well the night before, and I have high life stress and all these different things. And that doesn't serve you that well because then it can often become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I do think there's a very strong interplay between what your body starts to do physiologically when you're telling it, yeah, this is not going well or this is not going to go well, and what's actually happening. And so I've been trying really hard to catch myself when I'm doing that and just be like, I'm open-minded, or be curious about like, hey, maybe this is one of those days where I felt bad for the first 2 minutes or the first 15 minutes or the first hour. And then actually I took a gel and I felt better, or the sun came out and I felt better, or I was in the tailwind and I felt better. And there's lots of different things that could help with that. So just don't write that narrative before it happens. If you catch yourself doing it, think about curiosity, even if you can't be super optimistic, that's okay. Just say, you know what, open mind, let's see what happens today. And hopefully that'll help a little bit.
Yeah, it's so natural. I think we've talked about this before that humans have this. We have this negativity bias because that's what keeps us alive a lot of times, right? And so we were talking right before this podcast started, and I went for a ski today, a 2-hour ski. And I told you the first 75 minutes, I was struggling. I was like in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm going too slow. Oh, the snow's this, the snow's that. It's not groomed. I haven't been skiing, the whole thing. And it's like finally at 75 minutes, I stopped. I drank something, I ate something, and all of a sudden I looked up. I literally just looked up into the sky and was like, oh, wait. There's like blue sky. And I took my sunglasses off too, because sunglasses are kind of making it dark. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on, take my sunglasses off, look up in the sky, there's blue sky. Oh, look, there's trees. Oh, wow, this is actually a really super nice day. And then I had a very enjoyable 45 minutes. But yeah, the first 75 minutes, I was like, what am I doing? I suck at this sport, blah, 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 blah. So I totally get it. I think it's just so natural we do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, where right now you can say like, okay, the first 75 minutes were not great, and then the last 45 were actually pretty good. So maybe on the whole, it was a pretty good ski because it ended good. But if you had just stuck in that mindset, it probably would have been a 2-hour bad ski. So I love that. And also
Right.
thinking about like nature as a way to just reground and just like take a beat for a second and say, I need a reset, and like focusing on the nature, or focusing on the trees, or focusing on your body. I talked on the podcast that came out last week about embodiment, being in your body, like not being in your head. That's really, really hard to tap into, but I think there's something to it. So this is the embodiment year. Be in your body. Don't write the narrative before it happens. Woo-woo spirituality. We love it all.
Yeah, well, so one thing is along the same lines. Like, so I started to think about smooth. I always say to myself, smooth. And I've had this on a number of bike rides recently where I go out and, yeah, it's kind of cold and windy or this and that. And I just sort of get in my head about like, oh, should I be out here? And then you start looking at your heart rate, start looking at your powered and like, again, start writing the narrative. And then what I found really helpful is just say to myself, smooth, because smooth is not a heart rate zone. It's not a watt goal. It's not a pace. It's just a feeling. And so I find that if I just say to myself, smooth, and focus on smooth, what happens is I start to settle in a lot quicker into the ride or the run. And often what I find too is that I eventually find sort of my rhythm again. And I find like that performance that I was looking for to start with. So if I spend, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes on a bike just feeling smooth, all of a sudden I look down at my power meter and go, oh, wait, my heart rate's now in check and I'm doing the watts I want to do. And it kind of got there naturally. So I just had to sort of step back a little bit and like, don't look at the numbers. We've talked about this so many times. Don't look at the numbers. Think about this feeling. And then eventually the workout will come to you.
Yeah, and just remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I like that one too. It's like just
Mhm.
focus on that middle part, the smooth part, and you will actually probably be pretty fast. So that's a great one. Jim, next insight for you.
Okay, so we have a lot of people. So back to swimming, a lot of folks asking about like when should I use sim shorts? So these sim shorts are these neoprene shorts that Roka makes them. I think other companies make them, but they're meant to help you in the water, stay up in the water, right? And so instead of having just a regular wetsuit, you get a little bit of neoprene, and it's a little bit like wearing a pull buoy. And so I recommend that for a lot of new swimmers. And so I say, listen, if your A race is wetsuit legal and you are a new swimmer, and basically you're not looking to like be a quote swimmer, then I say it's fine to use the swim shorts for nearly like every session. And I used swim shorts for years and years and years and years until I was called up on my coach saying, you get those things off. And I'm like, I don't actually own a pair of swim trunks. But again, if you're like a level one athlete is new to you, then yeah, grab a pair of swim shorts and it really will help you get in this sort of parasympathetic mode and really just looking for pragmatism over perfection.
I love this. And I think this actually kind of translates super nice into your next swimming insight, just trying to get in that parasympathetic state and not be so freaked out by being in the water. So do you want to jump into that one?
Sure, yeah. So if you are feeling a little anxious or tight in the chest, this happens to me quite a bit. So try these two things. One is kicking your back. And I know I've talked about this a lot, especially for new swimmers, but I still do this as part of my warm up. So I put my fins on and I kick on my back. So therefore, like it signals to my brain that I'm okay in the water because my face is up and I have all the air that I want. And then it sort of puts me in this sort of parasympathetic state. And that's really the first order of business, shall we say, because you can't take on new information or learn new skills if you're in this sort of sympathetic state, the sympathetic state being sort of this fight or protect or flight or freeze mode. And so, in order for me to get better at swimming, and I find this a lot with new swimmers, especially in the Dharma team, like I have to move them from this sympathetic state of them like fighting the water and being freaked out because their face is in the water. So flip them on the back, put fins on them, and then you can watch after even just a couple minutes, like they start to relax. And then at that point, you can begin to instruct people. So I think if you're coaching yourself or just as you're just a regular swimmer, like I really find this very helpful, kicking it back. And then also the second thing I've been doing recently during freestyle, I've really been focusing on breathing out entirely through my nose. And I wasn't really sure if I was breathing out through my mouth before, but now I'm really just full exhalation through the nose. And what that happens is that it sort of lengthens out the stroke and it should help eliminate tightness in your chest and even your shoulders. And I did this the other day and I just said, I'm just going to focus on breathing out my nose. And as the swim went on, usually I get more and more tired. And as the swim actually went on, I started more and more relaxed. And I feel like I can just kind of keep going here. And this is the first swim I've done in probably 6 months. I'm way out of swim shape. I never should have felt this good, but it really was just because I was now just in this really flow state and I was very relaxed and I had plenty of, when I came up to breathe, when I rolled to breathe, like the air just came sucking into my mouth because I'd exhaled everything. So anyway, two things to try.
I love this. And one thing to point out here is it's really common to feel like that tight chest feeling or get kind of anxious in the water. Note that if you're feeling it in the pool, it's probably going to feel a little bit worse in the open water. So there is a huge return on your investment to trying to get super, super comfortable in the water now. Of course, very few of our athletes are open water swimming at this time, but I find that it can be a really hard adjustment to getting in that open water and know that if you're feeling that feeling here, it's likely to happen there. So that's just the incentive to say, like, it's not that the open water is going to be a safer place if the pool doesn't feel safe. So let's make sure that the pool feels really, really safe. And one other third tip I'll add here is I think it's very common when people get in the water. This happens a lot when I coach swim lessons where I'll be like, all right, I just want to see you swim a 50 and let's just see how it looks. And people will push off the wall for their very first 50 of the day like they are racing a 50, like they are Katie Ledecky at the Olympics. Their stroke doesn't really look like her, but that energy. And I find that that can sometimes just jack your heart rate up for the entire swim. So just really, really think about a gentle warm up, just like we do in running. We've talked about all the run warm ups we do. Whenever you do a structured Zwift workout that we have, there is a very slow ramp, 15, 20 minutes getting into your main set. And so a swim should be just like that too. And really, really think about, you don't want your fastest 50 to be the first 50 of the set. Instead, really tap into the slowest gear that you possibly can and literally say, my goal is to go slow right now. I think that can often help with not going straight to this super fluttery, anxious, tight chest feeling.
Yeah, I get this because I think it's really hard as a new swimmer, as an adult swimmer for most people to have more than just one speed, right? That one
Mhm.
speed is sort of panic and just sort of like, I'm going as hard as I possibly can. Especially maybe if you've been swimming like maybe masters or something where it's kind of like survival mode. But one thing that it took me many, many years to develop an easy speed, but I wish I had developed it a little bit sooner because you're right, during the warm-ups, like it really helps to go easy and to use some tools and some gear just to like, again, to put yourself in that parasympathetic state.
Yeah, I find that honestly just throwing on paddles and buoy is one of the best ways to do easy because you're not gonna sink as much between each stroke or even a set of fins. Use the toys, use all of them, and sometimes I won't even do regular freestyle until, like, 500 yards into my workout. I'll just start with a bunch of gear, and, I mean, these days, I basically only swim with gear because I like it a lot, and I refuse to do anything that I don't like in the pool, so gear for everyone all the time, and you'll be fine in your race. It'll be awesome.
Well, the cool thing also about paddles and buoys, they just have a regular swimsuit, like just put in a po' buoy and buoys because that actually does feel like a wetsuit, right? And again, I always want to think about like what's the end goal? The end goal is that my A race is with a wetsuit and I'm swimming, whatever it is. And so gear is legit, right? You have to get, and especially for new people, you have to get in that position in order to learn how to swim. And so it's not cheating at all. And yes, some swimmers look at you, oh, you're using too much gear. And I've heard this from other people saying, you use too much gear. It's like, no, I use just the appropriate amount of gear because I am trying to put my body in that position. And number two is like my A race isn't, a 5 mile swim in a Speedo.
I feel like the theme of this episode is things that you might think are cheating, but actually aren't cheating. We got the win thing, we got the gear thing. The
Right.
second point is that I really want a t-shirt that just says in big letters, gear is legit. That's a great
Here's
one.
I just want to take a lift to the other side of the pool and then swim back.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. Now we're talking. That's awesome. Okay. All right. My turn now. Insight from a couple of athletes. So we are now into February. A lot of people have been training for maybe 4 or 6 weeks so far. And something that I've talked to a few athletes about is the idea of changing your goals. So we talked about goal mapping a lot last season. A lot of people were super excited about really, really big performance goals, which is awesome. And we love that. But I think throughout the season, it's super natural to actually have sometimes a little bit of an evolution of what your goals are. So for example, let's say, you have a really audacious, fast goal for your Ironman or your half Ironman, and then you start doing the training and you're like, wow, the hours and intensity of training that's required to hit that goal that I did sketch out, as part of the process is actually a lot more than I am enjoying. This is not fun anymore, or I'm feeling a little bit burnt out, or I'm having trouble fitting in these other things in my life that I also want to be doing. That's a really good cue to think about, hey, it's also okay to reevaluate and change your goals and say, maybe my purpose is actually just that I really love triathlon and that I want to do some fun stuff with my friends and that I like to move my body. And maybe I could take off 2 or 3 hours in a week of training. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you might not hit that performance goal or not, but I think it takes a little bit of the pressure off to just recalibrate on that. So this is just a cue for everyone to know that racing can be anything that you want it to be. We can always pull the levers on volume and intensity, and sometimes reevaluating is actually something that can help you keep the joy in the sport and not get totally burnt out by it. So if you're starting to feel that push, it's okay. Let's reevaluate. Talk to your coach. There are so many roads to Rome with getting to the finish line of these races or getting in alignment with more purpose-driven kind of joy community goals. So just think carefully about that, especially if you feel like you're not enjoying what the training is, because we still have a lot of time. We have a lot of time to train. And if you're already not liking it, then we do want to make a change now.
Well, it's such a good point too, because like you said, we're in February now, and a lot of folks now have got 4 or 6 weeks of training in, and you start to see like, oh gosh, this might be my spring, and then you see how it rolls into the summertime, and yeah, this is a great point. Like, just it's a cue, like you say, to maybe this is not what I want to do, or maybe I want to change it just a little bit. And for me, like I really struggle because I love racing, and I love how racing is a place that elevates me and it really challenges me. And I do things in races that I would never do in training. And so that's just feels very empowering. But I also have this other part where I just find it's very confining and restrictive because I've got to do a certain thing on a certain day, which also means that I've got to do a certain bunch of things in a certain order of way for the next 2 months. And so I personally struggle with this because yeah, racing is great, but it's also like, oh, I dread it and I love it at the same time.
Yeah, totally. And I think the way to think through that is kind of you might love and hate many, many things in life. That's supernatural, but figure out, is it more love or is it more hate? Like if you find that you're really dreading most of your workouts and you love them occasionally, that's actually a really big sign. Or if there's the occasional workout that you dread, everybody has that happen all the time. Everybody has a moment of standing on the pool deck, if that's what it is for you, or like standing in your run shoes inside and you're like, oh, I really don't want to do this right now. But if that's happening every time, that's a good signal. And I think this actually translates pretty nicely into another one of my insights. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but being able to keep track of feelings like that and looking at them over time, kind of tracking your own training enjoyment or mood, all that stuff is really, really valuable. So something that I've started doing this year, and I've mentioned it a couple times on the podcast, and now I've started sharing with athletes, and I am linking it now in the show notes so everyone can do this, is I've developed what I'm calling an LSS track. And it's a little chart, and I've had so much fun with Google Sheets, kind of like learning how to make this all pretty and populate in the way that I want. But basically, every week I'm filling in a 1 to 10 on things like LSS, training enjoyment, overall mood. If you want to, you could put like hours of sleep, although most Garmin's will do that. And we'll talk about why we hate Garmin later. What else in there? Subjective fueling. So like how well am I crushing the fueling? All these different things. And then every week I put in that 1 to 10 rating, and it makes a pretty line graph over time, kind of throughout the season. And it's super cool because you can start to see things like, wow, my training enjoyment is going down. It went from a 10 to a 9 to an 8 to a 7 to a 6, back to a 7, down to a 6, 5, things like that. Or mood similarly is going down. On the flip side, you might see like, maybe my fueling fell a little bit off. Or actually my fueling is going up and then my mood is going up. All these different things and how they interact. So I'm just putting this out there as something that people can think about if they really want to fight that potential for burnout or potential for just getting too restrictive about the way we think about training and not really loving that whole process, because this type of trend tracking, I think, is a way to intervene. So we can say like, look, if we're getting to a point where training enjoyment is below a 7, often, then we got to change something. This is not working. It's okay to have dips every so often, but a consistent decline is not what we're looking for. So anyway, another challenge of the week. It's not my official challenge, but I'm throwing it in. Something to try is a little bit of LSS tracking and just see what those trends look like. It takes a couple seconds to fill it out. You can share it with your coach or you can keep it to yourself if you want to, but all about kind of doing that introspection and then catching yourself and having a plan if things start to drop off, I think has been awesome. And even for me, I've already noticed like I had a little bit of a dip in a lot of these things where I was like, mood's a little off, training enjoyment is a little off. And I started really prioritizing, like, I need a couple more social things per week. I need to really prioritize amazing sleep and really good fueling. And then lo and behold, all those things started to come back up. And I was like, oh, great. I actually love this sport again. We're totally fine. So there's things that you could do. And it's kind of satisfying to see, like, my goal is to get these things to be on the right track. And I have the power to change things to make that happen.
Yeah, I love this. This is such a great tool. Well, first of all, what is measured is managed. I love that quote. And then number two is one thing you've talked about in a previous podcast is like identifying these trends and patterns, which I think is super, super important because for all of us, we get so deep down dive into where the details of our day. And, one day feels up, one day feels down. This workout was great. This workout was bad. And I feel like as triathletes, there's so much coming at us all the time that it's easy to get sort of lost in the details. So I love how this sort of bumps you back out. And so my question is, would you recommend doing this like on a weekend or like a Sunday or like an off day on Monday when you've had a chance? What's the best practice for like really reflecting to put these values in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. My go-to has been Sunday recently. I have a couple athletes who I'm working with who we've actually done like a daily check-in if we really feel like things are not good. Like if you were at peak LSS and things are not going well, we can pivot to like, okay, let's do this for 2 weeks every day, or let's do it every other day, something like that. But I think the baseline for me is like fill it out every Sunday. And what I will actually do is go back into my training log and look at the comments that I was dropping in and be like, okay, we don't want to just think about the one big workout of the week. It's like, were we generally feeling pretty good or generally feeling tired or whatever that is? So just try to have a holistic view of it because exactly to your point right there, it's so easy to, number one, have a lot of recency bias. So you don't want to only base this on your Sunday workout, which might have been, for example, like a big bike or a long run. And you also want to be very holistic about thinking about just all of these things at the same time. So if you fueled really, really well one day and did not crush it every other day, that's not going to be a 10. You've got to be a little bit more honest about it. So at the end of the day, too, this is all totally subjective, but I do think everyone's pretty good at gauging for themselves what's going on. So a 6 for someone could be like the best that they're going to get, but that's actually pretty good for them. A 6 for someone else could be a huge red flag if they're always a 10. But as long as you have the same kind of standards for yourself, I think it's probably okay. And yeah, just be honest and know that it's not a bad thing if these dip. It's actually just a signal and it's a prompt to do something about it. I love what you measure, you manage. That's a really good one.
In Training Peaks, there is this like smiley face versus the unhappy face. And do you ever use that?
Yeah, I haven't really used that myself before. Some of my athletes do, and it does seem to correlate with their comments where if there's like a frown, it might be like I was tired or this didn't feel so good. So that's another indicator that you could go back and be like, wow, I frowned in every single workout, and that means training enjoyment is low or fatigue is high or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's really whatever works for you, and it doesn't even have to be this special chart. Some people like journal a lot and they're good at tracking that, but I just think having a pretty visual, I'm a kind of visual person, so having a chart to look at is sort of cool. So encourage others to make their own pretty chart if you don't want to use this one.
Yeah, I love this. And something I've been doing more this year is just, put a couple sentences in journaling basically in my Training Peaks and just to sort of document like, this is what I did. Some of it's just the objective, like I went here and did this with these people or alone or solo, or it was a slow day on the snow, whatever it was. But I'm just trying to put a little bit more in there. So when I look back over the week, I'm like, okay, how was the week? So I do like this better, this, putting a number on it, but I'm just also finding like the simple journaling in Training Peaks is really helping me. And if I had a coach, it would probably help them as well too. But this segues into one of my points, which is that, so folks are now starting to do some longer bikes. I've got one athlete who's doing a 100-mile race pretty soon. So they're doing really, long time on feet, runs and hikes. And so we started to see people put in, typically they say, oh, I ate, X, Y, and Z for, 3 hours. And I often go back and go like, okay, what did you eat in hour 1? What did you eat in hour 2? What did you eat in hour 3? And then you get back on more of a detailed thing. And often what happens when you say that, they say, oh, actually, I did well in hour 1, I did terrible in hour 2, I bunked in hour 3, then I got back and I had to make it up. And so this is just a prompt to say, start listing your products and your carbs per hour in your journal for these bigger days. And so, for example, like, hour 1, like I took 2 cyst gels and 1 bottle of Element and just say, okay, this is, 80 grams of carbs, whatever it is, right? So we're getting to the point where not quite with big days for a lot of people, but we're getting very, very close where it's just going to be very helpful if you just keep track of like what you're using and when you're using it and how much you're using, because fitness and fueling are equal partners on race day and on these bigger training days.
Yeah, and we've said this before too. Anytime you're going over 75 minutes or so, use it as an opportunity to just try really good fueling. Even if you're like, well, I ate right before this, like, I'm not sure. Why would we not use an opportunity to get better at something that is going to be absolutely crucial to our success on race day? So I don't really buy the argument of like, well, I can get through it without it. Don't do that. That's not our policy as coaches. Anytime you're over 75 minutes, just do it, do it, do it. And I will add too, something that I've noticed with athletes and I've noticed with myself too, is that many things in training that are not going well, not all things, but many things can just be solved by taking a gel. Like your motivation is low, take a gel. You're tired, take a gel. You don't feel good, take a gel. You feel like you have a niggle coming on. First, try taking a gel. And then if that doesn't work, we can run down all the other things that might be, actually contributing. I'm not going to say that it's only that, but start with taking a gel is my quick insight, because sometimes just getting a really big hit of carbs, like one of those beta fuels, they have 40 grams, or there's precision hydration, has 30 plus. Those can sometimes just wake your whole body up and be like, I'm actually amazing. I'm going to crush this. And I think that you'll see the performance benefits very, very quickly.
Yeah, for me, like across the board, and I know personally and across the board, like I don't know if I know any triathletes who are overfed and
Mhm.
overhydrated. I think it's just the other way around. And I love this. Like we always say, bring snacks, but right, the gel, the quick thing, right? So what's just some general guidelines of like, say I'm doing easy training day under 1 hour. Are you feeling for that? Is that part of just a normal eating, or what are your recommendations?
Yeah, so I think for anything that's under an hour and all easy intensity, as long as you've eaten something in the day before it, you can probably get by without having to take in fuel during it. So, for example, you wake up, you've got a 45-minute zone 2 run on the calendar, you eat a snack or breakfast, you go do it, you fuel when you get back. That's totally fine with me as a coach. However, if you're feeling low energy, why not try taking a gel and then see if it helps? I just probably wouldn't build that into my it must happen every single time strategy, unless I'm working with an athlete, for example, who I'm very worried about low energy availability or think that they're kind of falling off.
And then it mentions here, so between 1 and 2 hours, we're looking at probably what, 60 to 80 grams of carbs per hour. Would you sort of recommend?
Yeah, I think so. I've had most athletes get up to 70, and if 70 sits really well, I tell them try 80, and if 80 sits really well, I'll try 90. So some of my athletes are crushing it and can already smash like 90 grams of carbs. Again, 1 to 2 hours, maybe you don't need that necessarily, but it's going to make it a lot easier when you bridge to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, et cetera, if you can already crush it at that point.
Yeah, and especially too, like if you're doing any kind of like right now, we're doing some of the Sunday runs or runs and bikes that people are doing right now. There's definitely some moderate, there's some intervals in there as well too. So, pushing up to that 90 grams of carbs per hour for those bikes and those runs probably pretty important because yeah, there's some intensity happening now in some of these plans.
And I will say too, if you kind of vary your products, it can sound like 90 grams of carbs is a lot, but gels are really good and carb mixes are really, really good. So don't think that you have to necessarily take in 90 grams worth of like bread or Cliff Bars or something. That's just a lot of volume and bulk in your stomach that doesn't actually feel that good. But again, like I really, really have been enjoying actually, this is going to get to my gear pick of the week, but the SIS beta fuels, they're 40 grams of carbs and they go down so easy. So if you do like one of those and then one other gel that has like 30 grams, that's 2 gels. That doesn't even take a lot of time in an hour. And before you know, you're at 70 grams. So there's a lot of creative ways to do it that don't feel like you're necessarily at this rolling buffet.
And this is where we insert our fake sponsorship from the feed.
Yes, I know. Our fake sponsorship for the feed. I had a feed box come the other day and I had ordered it literally 3 weeks ago. And just like you said, I was like, I have no idea what I even ordered. But it was a fun surprise to open it up and be like, all right, good. I've got some beta fuels to last me for the next couple of weeks.
Well, two things on that. So I succumbed to there's like a feed first, I think. It's like an Amazon Prime from the feed, and you get free shipping now. So I paid the $99 for that. And what this allows you to do is like actually this afternoon, I have a product here that's called Ascent. It's a proteins slash iced coffee mixture. It's really, really good. And I was like, I love this thing. And it's a limited edition. So I just jumped onto the feed and I was like, I want the next bag of this because it's a limited edition and it's free shipping. So it's worth it. And they also get you in a little bit with, they'll give you like 6 free water bottles that are personalized for you. And they give you a sweatshirt, which has already gone to the Listen Center already. But, but 6 free water bottles, fine. Those can be good for throwaways. For example, like say you're doing Ironman, you want to start with 2 water bottles that you don't really like. You can get rid of those. So anyway, that's like this little shout out for the Feed First program.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to riff on just one more than fueling and hydration related insight. Something I have been more aware of recently that we should all be aware of is that dehydration, I think, actually happens a lot more sneakily in the winter than it does in the summer. And I had this experience the other day where I'd had a pretty big training weekend, and then I kind of moved into the next week. I had my recovery day, and then I had a very early morning strength workout. So I think it was like 7 a.m. or something. And for the first time ever, I don't know what was happening, but I was actually very dizzy in this strength workout, and I knew that I was well fueled. I'm like quite on top of the way that I feel before workouts. I didn't do anything differently. And my strength trainer, she's like, "You're looking pretty pale. Like everything okay over there?" And then I sort of racked my brain to think through what had been going on, and I realized I worked out a ton over the weekend, and I did not really bring hydration with me because it was super cold and super windy. And then I had my recovery day on Monday, and so I wasn't really training a lot. And I don't think it occurred to me to hydrate super well. And finally, we roll into Tuesday, and I was probably extremely dehydrated, but I just hadn't even noticed. I hadn't even thought about it. And I think in the summer when we're sweating a lot, we just get thirsty a lot more easily. But this landed me in a situation where we needed to totally modify this workout because I was like just not even fully present and fully there. And then, of course, as soon as I really pushed hydration for the next couple of days, I was 100% feeling back to normal. So all this is to say you have to be a lot more intentional about hydrating super, super well in the winter. I've just made it a goal for myself to say like, hey, I've got this big water bottle and I'm going to drink it 3 times. And I also will set a target of like, okay, I need to finish the first one by 11 a.m. and then the next one by like 2 p.m. and then the third one by the time I go to bed, because otherwise I might make it to like 5 p.m. and be like, well, I had half of one and it is not going to work for me to do another 2.5 before I go to bed at 9 o'clock. So all this to say, I am previewing what I think maybe my challenge of the week was related to hydration. But definitely think about it. And if you're ever feeling kind of like a little dizzy, a little off, it could be some type of electrolyte imbalance or dehydration.
Yeah, +1 for the winter stuff. So one thing I've started doing this year is I've started putting I'm not a big liquid calories person, but I started doing liquid calories mostly in Morton and my bike bottles. So I'm hitting 2 things. I'm hitting hydration because I want the calories 'cause I'm getting hungry out there. And so I've put the liquid calories in there. So now I'm hitting hydration and calories at the same time. And I find that's really helpful a bunch. And this hydration theme will lead into my gear pick of the week. So stay tuned for that.
Ooh, exciting. All right, Jim, I've done a couple. So do you want to go next?
Okay, back to swimming a little bit here. So funny, I've got some comments recently about like, my swimming seems to be having some crossover especially into running. And I think we see this a lot. It's like if you start to swim, swimming is such a globally depending oxygen activity that if you do swim a bunch, you're just going to feel fitter and it's going to carry over, particularly into running. So one thing you could do actually here is a little sort of extra challenge is that you just swim 200s with fins and paddles. And it sounds very easy, if you will, but we have found there's just a huge oxygen ask even at low intensities by swimming with fins and paddles. So you can try that. And then also you can try other sports like, Nordic skiing. And I know we talk about, cross training a lot, but Nordic skiing is also just a great sport for this global oxygen demand. So anyway, if you start to feel like I'm swimming more and I'm feeling fitter and I'm running faster, well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and I think the broader point here too is that all the sports do help each other. It's not like when you train in the pool, you are only making yourself better at swimming. Like you're doing aerobic base or you're doing speed. Anytime you're working in heart rate zones, you're doing aerobic development and often you're working muscles that can support all the other sports that you're doing. So I just wouldn't think about, for example, some people will say like, oh, I noticed I only had 2 swims in Training Peaks this week. Maybe normally they're doing 3 swims. That's actually okay. That doesn't mean we're only going to make 2 swims worth of progress that week because I'm probably giving you something else that's moving towards this broader goal of the aerobic development, the durability, the muscular development, et cetera. So just don't think about these things as silos. Obviously, if you've never swum before, you can't run your way to a swim race. But for triathletes, there's, I think, a lot more crossover than we think.
All right, what do you got here? I want to hear about this, the truth about Whoop. I want to hear this one.
Oh my gosh. I texted this article to you last week and I was like, we have to talk about this on the podcast because I feel like these days we can't get through a podcast without bashing on data. We've already bashed on data a little bit today, but there was this article that came out that a friend shared with me that was very validating based on the conversation we had a couple weeks ago about how all of this data coming from our watches is often kind of BS. So this was a blog post that says The Truth About Whoop and Other Fitness Trackers, Part 1. And basically was talking about Whoop's metric for something like strain, which I think Garmin has similar things. Garmin has like its body battery and Oura Ring has readiness score, all these different things. And basically what this article is arguing is that all of these metrics are totally made up. They are not true physiological measurements. There is no such thing actually as a body battery. Instead, it's an estimate. It's trying to estimate something based on basically optical heart rate. So whether it's wrist heart rate from Whoop or Garmin, or it's like finger heart rate from Oura Ring. And the issue with this is that optical heart rate works pretty well when you're at rest. So if you're like sleeping, for example, usually your resting heart rate that is captured by these devices is pretty similar to what you would get if you went to a lab and did it with very professional equipment. But when you start moving, it's pretty bad. And we have all had the experience, I'm sure, of you forget your heart rate strap, you go out for an easy run and it says your heart rate is 220 or something, or it's 195. It's just not true. You're frustrated. And then your watch also takes that into account and thinks that you did a crazy thing, that you ran for 45 minutes at above your max heart rate. And of course, it's going to give you some type of strain score that says you did something absolutely crazy. So I'm going to just read a couple quotes that are validating from this article. They say, in some cases, these estimates are completely made up and cannot even be tested. For example, sleep quality scores, readiness and recovery scores, stress, body battery, strain, etc. Stay away from all of these and don't let them mess with your head. They are not a thing. And then something else they talked about too was Whoop and other different devices, they don't really differentiate between different things in your life that could be contributing to strain. So this says, even though I like Whoop's idea of adding life stress into strain, we need to remember that not all changes in heart rate at rest are from bad stress. For example, a higher heart rate at rest because your boss is yelling at you, probably bad. A higher heart rate at rest because you're laughing your ass off with your friends, probably good. So all this is to say, I mean, we say it over and over and over again, but don't read into these metrics too much. Our watches are useful for some things. Usually the pace is about right. There's a lot of other metrics. If you have a chest heart rate strap, yes, we are using heart rate data. When we use these to tell us like how good we are as a person, how well recovered we are, what our readiness score is, I think it just does so much more harm than good. So I'm taking a step back. I usually just laugh at it now when I look at these numbers because they don't track with how I generally feel. And I'm glad this article agrees too.
So you were wearing an Oura Ring for a while, or what were you wearing?
Yeah, so, okay, I still am wearing my Oura Ring, which I
Okay.
feel like I am losing some credibility, but there are actually things that I think you just have to sift through what's actually useful from
Mm.
that Oura Ring. So I think resting heart rate is useful for me because
Yeah.
I do think it's pretty good at measuring at rest what your heart rate is like. I do not use Oura at all for fitness tracking because Oura, I think, is the very worst out of all the trackers at capturing within workout heart rate. Again, I did like an hour easy run the other day. I had my chest strap on that was going to my Garmin. My heart rate was probably 140 or something. Aura clocked me at 195 and then told me that I was way overexerting for the day because, of course, if I ran for an hour at 195 heart rate, that would be too much exertion. And then the last thing I do like Aura a lot for is body temperature. It's a nice way to know if you're getting sick, for example, as well as cycle tracking for female athletes. So all of those things I think are still worthwhile for me, but I've really taken a step back from using like the readiness score or even some of the sleep data as a referendum on how I'm going to feel for the rest of the day.
So you know what's even better than Whoop and Aura and Garmin is your new LSS training chart.
Exactly.
That's the thing you want to use, right? That's the trend, and that's the 360 view.
Thank you. I should probably trademark it. I'm just giving it to people. It's like a free Google sheet right now, but I might be putting a copy.
Yeah, don't trademark it. Just charge people like $20 a month for it forever, right? Yeah, yeah. And to keep spitting stuff out and saying like you must rely on me to tell you how you feel. Yes.
There you go. Yeah, that's the end all be all. Exactly. But all right, Jim, back to you. What is your next insight?
Okay, what do we have here? Oh, so I have some people asking about how do I incorporate HIIT into my high intensity training, into my triathlon training. And so my short answer is you really don't. But a little more nuanced than that. But basically, I find that like 99% of the time that folks who are doing HIIT workouts, it's because, it's an entry level, right? It's an entryway into exercise. And I get that. And there's a lot of cool things out there that introduce people to getting healthy. And so I don't want to denigrate HIIT or the places that run these workouts. But a lot of times, you come to us, you didn't get into a sort of proper structured training program, and that we're really trying to prioritize this aerobic development, this gradual musculoskeletal loading, and just building your health and wellness sort of in a slow, measured way, as opposed to HIIT, which is just sort of a very much microwave society type thing. And I also tend to find that these athletes tend to be like a little bit, they're either really overpowered or they're very underpowered. And one of those situations really works well in endurance sports. So my message to the folks is usually like the triathlon is like this, it's insane sport. We talk about this all the time. You have to learn dozens, if not hundreds of new skills for each sport. Swim, bike, and run. And also then if you add in regular strength, that's 4 sports you're now juggling. And, just getting good at one sport is amazing. Trying to get good at 4 sports is just crazy. So anyway, everyone is time crunched. So this leaves very little time for other sports. But the only caveat I'll have here is that I've got folks who are doing a HIIT class and it's their time to see friends. It's their social time. So I say, if you are doing a HIIT class and it gives you joy and it's social and it's fun, then we'll continue to keep that in your training plan and we'll do that. But if you're just doing like HIIT as sort of like an entry level and now you've come into a structured program, we can often just drop the HIIT and focus on like the main event.
I like this. And I think something else too is that with HIIT, the goal is really to keep your heart rate up high the entire time. Some of the exercises that happen in HIIT workouts actually can find their way into a good strength program. So just to give an example of that, I've sort of pivoted into a new phase of strength training right now where I'm doing some heavy lifting that will just maintain the muscle that I built during my general preparation phase with strength. And then I'm doing some more plyometric exercises that could probably find their way into a HIIT class, something like med ball slams or doing jump squats or box jumps, all that stuff. But the difference is I'm doing that for about 30 seconds and then I am totally letting my heart rate come down. Whereas in a HIIT class, you're going to be going from like burpees to jump squats to med ball slams and you're at 165 heart rate the entire time. So if you really like that type of plyometric movement, that's great for making you a faster runner and doing lots of different things that will develop you as an athlete, but it needs to be bounded and it needs to be small doses that actually allow you to let your heart rate come down between them. I think if you're just jacked up there the entire time, it's just gonna be too much stimulus when you're already trying to juggle a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I think we come back to this. We talked about this in another podcast, in that you do this once and then you let your heart rate come down. Because what drives adaptation the best is absolute power. Like the most you can bring to bear on, say, a max hill sprint, or if you're doing like neuro work on the bike, or even just some of the hit stuff, right? Like you want to bring your absolute best to it, your absolute power to it, because that's really what drives the adaptation. And the problem with HIIT is that maybe you do the first rep as like, I'm full, I'm doing 125% of my effort, but then you just degrade all the way through. And by the time you get down to the circuit, you're like, I'm at 30% effort on these things that I'm doing. And I've been in these HIIT classes before, and it all starts great, and it always just ends in tears. And everybody's like, I'm not bringing any more power, additional power. I'm bringing so much less power to, now I'm doing the third or fourth thing. I'm trying to climb the rope, but I was just doing box jumps over here, and it's like I have nothing left, and I'm not getting anything because I'm not driving any kind of new stimulus because I have no more power to bring to this exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe one way to actually make this more tractable is if you really like those exercises and you want to do them, one thing to think about it is like, okay, let's say I'm going to do box jumps for 30 seconds. I'm going to see how many I can do. Maybe I'm going to do about 3 sets. That third set, you should still be able to do as many as you could do the first time. And I bet you if you did a 4th set, 5th set, 6th set, it's going to start to drop off a little bit. And you can do that experiment if you want to, but figuring out the sweet spot of I'm going to give this my best effort for 30 seconds or close to it, maybe 95%. And then I'm just going to repeat that the number of times I actually can repeat it. It's not going to be a lot of times. Maybe it's just 2 times, and that's totally okay. But if you're trying to build your own routine, I think that's probably a nice way to think about these sort of higher intensity plyometric movements.
Yeah, that's what we think about in terms of like, track sessions, for example, if you're trying to hit a certain time for a 400 or 800. And once you start to fall off that, which is just basically, it's not a judgment on who you are. It's just a judgment like, I just can't bring any more power or the appropriate power to this interval. And I just need to stop because I'll come back. I'll come back next week and do it again. And maybe I can do another one. But again, absolute power drives adaptation.
Yeah, the rule is either when you start to drop off or when you start crying, that's when you get to stop the workout. That's when there's no more reps on the track.
Exactly right.
We're relentless coaches. We really are.
Exactly right. If you don't cry, yeah,
If you don't cry, you didn't try.
that's right. Exactly.
Okay, I want to share a question from an athlete that I think is useful to riff on. This question was talking about pickups in a run, actually, for some context here. So think about 4-mile run with 8 by 20-second pickups. I'm pretty lackadaisical with doing the pickups, but I know many coaches swear by them as ways to improve running economy and efficiency and a light way to add speed early in the season. Should I be more intentional about doing them and not skipping them? Normally, I just either forget or feel tired and just want to get home rather than zoom and jog. So I thought this was a really good question, and I often sometimes get a little bit lazy with my pickups because I look at the 4 mile run with 8 by 20-second pickups on the calendar. I'm like, yeah, is that really that important? But as I've sort of evolved, I will say that pickups actually are definitely helpful unless you have like an injury or a niggle going on where I'm going to kind of avoid speed. If you're feeling really, really exhausted, we've talked about how that can be the first thing to go. But sometimes I find that it's just your brain that's a little tired or feeling a little bit lazy, and your body's actually totally fine. So usually, if it's just your mind and not your body, I tell people just try a few. Like do a couple of pickups and see how it goes. And if they really don't feel good after one or two, it's totally okay to shut it down. But you might actually find like, oh, this is actually waking me up and I feel pretty good. You might do all 8. So that's my advice for a question like this. Huge return on the investment of doing them. But if you're really, really not feeling it, it is okay. We're still valid. Just think about it a little bit, whether it's mind or body.
I love this question. This is such a good question because there's so many levels to it, right?
Mhm.
And for me, like I struggle with things I'm supposed to do, right? Like I'm supposed to have 3 fruits and vegetable servings per day. And not only that, like the fruits and vegetables are in the refrigerator or sitting out on the counter. And yet I still don't do it. So why is it, right? So like they're right there. Like I've done the work. I've gone to the grocery store. They're all sitting right here. Just do it, but I don't do it. So anyway, when that comes up, sometimes I just try to dig a little bit deeper in my subconscious, like what is preventing me? Like, why am I saying no to something that's really good for me? We're just, we're very complicated creatures, and the answer isn't always like right there. But anyway, I just want to validate that I really struggle with this as well. But I will say, like the sell on the pickups are that they, like you said, they're the best return on your investment, and you've already invested the time to schedule your workout. You've got your running clothes on. You get out the door. You actually went for a run. And so you've done like all the hard parts about that now. And so now if you just get to do some pickup, it can be fun. And so the origin of Fire Lake, which is we use sometimes in our run, it's just speed play. And so what I'll just do for pickup sometimes is I'll just go along. And I'll say, oh look, there's a telephone pole. Let me run hard to it. And I'll run hard to it. And then like maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30 seconds. I don't know what it is, but like I ran to the telephone pole, and then like I'll jog a little bit more and I'll look for something else and I'll say, oh, wait, there's an intersection up there. Great. I'm going to run towards that. And again, it could be 10 seconds. It could be 30 seconds. It could be 40 seconds. I don't know. I'm going to run fast to that intersection. So I would say, just try to incorporate some play into it, because I know sometimes I grate a little bit when it's like you must do this thing at this certain time. I don't know, like this anti-authoritarian thing I have in me. But when I turn it to play, I often will be like, oh, this is kind of fun and I want to do this. And like strides are like the ultimate compound interest. Like the more you do, the more rewards you get, the faster you get, the more running economy you get. And running just becomes easier, and you've just been doing these little bouts of like speed. And so it's just very cool. There's very few like magic workouts, but I think strides, slash pickups, they're one of the few magical things that we actually do.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like we say there are no shortcuts, but I actually think strides sort of are a shortcut. Like that is
Yes.
the shortest shortcut to speed of the things that we can give you for speed development. So
Yeah.
just think about that. And maybe just hearing this will make people be like, huh, maybe I don't actually want to skip them anymore. So something to think about.
Or maybe they'll say, I heard this on a podcast. I'm definitely not going to do it now. That's something I would do. Like, those guys, I'm not doing it at all.
Right on. All right, Jim, we're coming up on some time. So why don't we each pick, you want to pick one more each, and then we'll move to challenge of the week and gear pick of the week?
Yeah, let's see here. What do I have here? Oh, and just the last one, really real quick one here. So we are getting some longer rides on the trainer. And this is just a reminder, like you can change your hand positions. So go on the hoods, go on the bars, like go on the drops, or feel free to stand up during some of the intervals. But again, just want to change body position, change hand positions. Again, make it fun, take pressure off places that have a lot of pressure. You're very static on the trainer. So again, it's back to that sort of play and just having fun. Like just move around a little bit on your bike. And it'll also help you translate better into outdoor, where you are more likely to change, stand up, go in the hoods, go in the drops, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love this, and it reminds me of the very first year that we were in the pain cave in like 2019 training for Ironman Lake Placid. Everyone called me the Aero Queen because I just stayed in aero the entire time. I don't recommend that at all. That is not how outdoor riding is at all. I think I almost did it because I wanted to prove a point that I could.
Mm.
But whenever I hear athletes are just like, "Oh yeah, I've got neck pain, I've got shoulder pain," and I'm like, "Well, are you in aero for 99.9% of your workout the entire time?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "It's okay. Sit up. It's totally fine." Or you can use different intervals to say like, "Okay, I might do the interval intervals and aero, but then I'm going to sit up during the recoveries, or I'm going to be in aero during the recoveries and sit up during the intervals. It's totally fine. Think about outdoor riding. This is especially true if you have a hilly race coming up. You're going to be up and down the entire time. So no stress. The trainer's hard enough. Don't make it harder for yourself.
One thing I'll do is I'm watching sports with, say I'm riding aero. I'll ride aero during the game, but then I'll sit up during the commercials.
There you go. That's like a fartlek on the bike.
It is exactly right. Yeah. Although now with with the NFL playoffs over and the Super Bowl coming up, I feel a little lost on Sundays. I'm not sure what to do with myself on my Sunday rides right now.
I know. Well, I think this is going to air after the Super Bowl, so you will probably be in deep despair by that time with absolutely nothing to do. But
I will be. Thank God there's YouTube out there.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to finish us out with one other great question for an athlete. The question is about green boxes on Training Peaks. So I think often people, well, actually, maybe some important context to give here is that Jim and I have a workout library. All the endurance drive coaches, we have a workout library, and we drag the workouts in. And the workouts have a planned pace for a run pace. And I wish that they didn't, but they have to because we have to put in a planned value. And sometimes people get really, really worked up because maybe I put in a run that had a planned value where the pace was 10-minute miles, and their zone 2 pace is closer to, say, 10:30 or 11-minute miles. And so they can do the workout as planned, zone 2, 4 miles, but then they don't get the green box. And it's led to many, many questions about, did I do something wrong? Or should I be going for time on feet? Like, what do I need to do to get the green box, get the green box? And a big reminder here that I want to share with everyone is that the intention of the workout is the most important thing. And I don't really care whether it's 3.5 miles or 4.5 miles or 4 miles, or if you did 10:30 or at 9:30, as long as you were going for zone 2. So whenever you see the workout description, I would not look at any of those values. I would just look at what is the workout description, 4 miles, zone 2 pace, walk breaks as needed, whatever that is. And if it bothers you, I will go in and change the plan values so that it's not a yellow box or an orange box or a red box, or you as the athlete can do that. But I get it. It's really, really tempting to just do everything you can to get a green box, but sometimes it's just a library administrative issue rather than something that you did right or wrong in your workout.
Yeah, since this is the classic, it's a map, but it's not the territory, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, and so it's just in theory. It's like I change. I mean, at least once or twice a week I go in and I write my own plan for myself. But once or twice a week I'll go in and like, oh, it's a yellow box because X, Y, and Z, right? Life got in the way or whatever. I walked more, and I'll just go back and change the time. So I always tell people like, yeah, just change the time, make it green. You hit the intention of the workout, you're fine.
Yeah, I feel like this is enabling athletes now to change everything all the time to be green, but do it. It's okay. It's your life.
Go
It's your
for it.
training plan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's do a challenge of the week and a gear pick of the week. I think I actually mentioned both of these, so they're going to be rapid fires for me. My challenge of the week is set some hydration targets throughout the day. I want to finish X amount of water by noon, X amount of water by dinner, etc. That can help you stay accountable and on top of your waters. I've even seen some fancy water bottles out there that have times throughout the water bottle, and so it's like, I'm going to finish this, but I don't have that. I just have a regular water bottle. But be creative about it and figure out what's a sustainable goal for you and what's going to make you feel really good, and see if it helps you feel better in your workouts.
I love this one. My challenge of the week I mentioned before, but just emphasize full nose exhalation during the swim.
Love it. Okay. And also in life, I would say deep breaths are good. Fully exhale just when you're walking
Yes.
around. It's good.
It's very good. Especially I find also before I run, I try to really do big exhalations, before I run, and also like sort of during my run warm up, I'll really try to do that full belly breath to really try to relax and drop my diaphragm.
Gotta activate the parasympathetic state.
You betcha.
All right, gear pick of the week. I also mentioned this already. 2 gels I've been loving recently. Precision Hydration makes a gel. It's like a very light, sort of neutral flavor. You can barely taste it, and before you know it, you've knocked down 30 grams of carbs. So that's been pretty good. They're also like smaller, just in size, so easier to like shove a bunch of those in a pocket than some of the other bigger gels. And then the Big Daddy gels that I've been loving, the SIS Science and Sport Beta Fuels. They are amazing. I really like the strawberry and lime flavor. But for me, like if I'm doing long run or something, I'll do 1 Beta Fuel and 1 Precision Hydration. Usually I try to get those in like 50 minutes rather than an hour. And then as it kind of spills in, I can top off just a little bit more carbs. But that's felt really good for me. So I'm recommending those gels.
You're inspiring me. I have a bunch of SIS beta fuel in the drawer and I haven't pulled them out yet, but sort of been saving them. But I think the message today is like, don't save them. Like, go big.
And actually, one other thing on the Beta Fuel is recently I took a Beta Fuel right before a run workout, and I'd like eaten before, like I ate breakfast, but I was like, like, am I hungry? I'm not sure. And anytime you're asking yourself if you need to fuel, just try it. So I was like, all right, well, let's just see how this works. And I swear I felt like it was a rocket ship. It was like a performance enhancing drug. And I had one of the best run workouts that I've done recently. So you heard it here first. Beta Fuel is something else for sure.
Yep, sugar baby. Let's go. My gear pick of the week it's a long story, but anyway, related to hydration. And I find that the container that I use for hydration is really what determines how much I will drink during the day. So found these WEC canning jars. They're like basically 3/4 of a liter. And Katie's been watching me drink tea out of one this whole time, but they are awesome for hydration goals. And they're great for cold drinks like mocktails, put a bunch of ice in them, or they're good for warm drinks as well. And you can order them in a size 2. And I feel like I'm just hydrating so much more because I have this vessel, which I want to like handle and you can see the liquid in it. And anyway, I feel like I'm well hydrated nowadays.
I mean, there's totally a point to that having a fun water bottle, for me, like having a straw, that changes everything. And I have like a Stanley cup that has a straw in it, and that really, really has helped me drink more because it's fun to drink out of a straw relative to not a straw. So just find something that works for you. Another challenge of the week is find a fun water bottle, and maybe you'll drink a lot more.
Do you use the Stanley one because is that a Bruce Clayton gift?
No, it's not. I did not purchase this. I got it as a gift, and it has been awesome, actually. The one thing I don't like about it is that sometimes it leaks, like if it's in my backpack and it's sloshing around and I'm running around the city of Boston. But then I learned that the Stanley Cups, you can actually take the straw out and turn I don't even know what it's called. There's a plastic piece you can turn such that it doesn't slosh all over the place. So now I've solved that issue. It recently happened to me where I walked all the way across the city with that in my backpack, and then I arrived at where I was going, and I was like, "Why are my pants soaking wet?" And I had dumped the entire water bottle all over my pants. So that was bad. That was a ding against Stanley Cup, but now I've solved that issue. So my life is really hard. It's challenging. A lot of challenges for me.
I was just going to say we need to go after Stanley as a sponsor of our podcast now. So,
Ooh, that'd be so good. Could we get custom endurance drive Stanley Cups?
or measuring sticks or measuring tapes or whatever, right? Yeah, all the Stanley stuff because all the construction that we do here at the endurance day out, right?
I know, a whole lot of that. Awesome.
Mhm.
All right, well, this has been a blast. Everyone keep on keeping on. You're doing great stuff. It's awesome to be a coach at this time of year. Everyone's just getting the work done, and that feels really good. If you're new to the podcast, please consider sharing it with someone that you know who might be interested in any of these grab bag topics, or dropping us a rating or a review on your favorite podcasting platform. But thank you all so much for listening. We love doing this, and it's great to have such a great community of listeners.
Thanks, peeps.